got talent, my boy. Do it again.
So I absolutely love this series. First and foremost, I'm a historian and anthropologist, and I've done a lot of research into Robin Hood for years. So I love this series. I loved what you did with it. I'm really curious for both of you. What is one aspect of the Robin Hood kind of legend and myth that really resonates with you?
For me, it's just the power of the individual. That one person can change the community. The larger municipal, the city, the world. We've seen it over and over again in history, and that's something for me that really drew me to it personally.
For me, one of the things that I really loved is that I was really interested in was the mythology connected to his Saxon identity. The England in that period was, had been conquered by Normans, and that they were sort of stamping out paganism and stamping out the Saxon mythology and Saxon superstition, these old customs that had existed in England for hundreds of years. And this idea of this old mythology of the woods, of the trees, this old faith was being lost, and that the Robin Hood story is very connected to all of that. That was something we wanted to touch on and develop a little bit within our story.
I really liked how it has that magical element to it, but it never fully kind of tips into that fantasy element fully. Yeah. And I'm curious how you kind of worked on keeping that balance where it stays very true to that Saxon identity and that those Saxon belief systems, but it's still very grounded in an element of reality.
Well, we wanted it to feel real. It was never going to be a fantasy show. There was never going to be fantasy, or magic within the show, but we did want to dramatize that mythology. We wanted to visualize, and find a sort of visual language for that mythology, for that superstition. I mean,
and take them seriously. Like, take those belief systems seriously, because I think there's times for all of us in life we feel like there are external forces that are operating upon us. Maybe they're supernatural, maybe they're not, but belief systems are very real in all of us, in all human beings, whether you're religious or not. It doesn't matter. So kind of bringing that into the show in a grounded way, though, and letting it live, letting it really be a part of the show. But as Jonathan said, it's like, we don't go into magical realism or fantasy. It's just, it feels like it might actually be happening.
Absolutely.
And equally, we wanted to show the flip side, the other side, which was Christianity. And Christianity was obviously the faith of the Normans, and and not to show that faith was, just all bad, and obviously there are the bishop is a pretty negative figure, but it's not because he's Christian, it's because he's greedy and he's all about power and money. But Friar Tuck is all about, the Christian faith and what it represents to him, and it has a very strong human, spiritualism that he imparts to Rob, and we wanted there to be a sort of discussion between them, between the pagan and the Christian faith as well, and that was a part of it.
You handled it so well. It works so well. I've seen the first kind of 7 episodes already, and I love that dialogue that's being threaded through it. You mentioned visual language, and that's something I love about film. And obviously, Robin Hood is a story that has been adapted a lot over the years, whether it's Prince of Thieves, Men in Tights, you have the BBC Robin Hood series. Were there any adaptations or versions of the legend that you look to for either things that you were interested in kind of maybe finding that visual through line through in your series, or maybe you're like, this is not an element of that legend that I want to bring into my story?
I mean, I think
more other shows.
Yeah, more other shows. I mean, I'm very much influenced by Peaky Blinders. I mean, I love Peaky Blinders. The writing is so incredible. The world making, the world building is so real. Feels so like, it really feels like you're there, or like like that world exists outside of the front door. And Jonathan is a huge fan of the Vikings. So am I. But it's sort of like this intersection of, this very different show, which doesn't have anything to do with those two shows, but this sort of the way that the approach of those two shows by the creators was very, I think, influential. We wanted to try to do something that felt just as real.
And they took the material very seriously. And I think that's the thing as well. You feel with a lot of versions of Robin Hood that the creators are not always taking the material, truly seriously. And that's fine, because sometimes people just, they want to do something that's a little bit lighter, a little bit more, about entertainment or something. But for us, we wanted the material to feel, we were very committed to the material, and for us, it was really important that it felt believable and it felt real. So yeah, Vikings, Peaky Blinders were big influences. We also wanted it to feel big and lavish and beautiful. Movies like Pride and Prejudice were somehow influential because of the romance of the story. And, the love story is very, as you've seen, it's, the love story is really the beating heart of this as well. It's really about this sort of Romeo, Juliet, Robin and Marian love story, which hasn't been a big focal point in a lot of Robin Hood shows before, but also the romance of the world, the idea of it being a place, the forest being really beautiful and, intoxicating, to kind of go into that world.
And you're talking about the scale of this show, and something I was so impressed with was that the costumes and the set design and so many elements. Using lime to help kind of hasten the decomposition of the body is like little things like this that so oftentimes kind of get lost in favor of anachronism. I'm curious, what were those conversations like with all of your department heads and kind of bringing this historical element to it? And it seems very grounded in actually doing your history, which is a novelty sometimes in today's era.
It was. A lot of that comes from Jonathan too, just, sort of really understanding the period and being very committed, as a director, in particular for Jonathan, being incredibly committed to even the smallest details. And, the swords and the costume, it's all period appropriate. It's all handmade too. There's nothing in the show you see that we didn't make. So it's not like we rented it from some prop house somewhere. We made it all, but a lot of that comes from Jonathan's brain and his vision as a director.
It's really just like making, we set it, it's very specifically set in the 12th century and 1160, 1170. So in all the departments, across all the departments, particularly the set design, the props and the costume, everything had to be based on things from the 12th century. Very simple in a way. And there's a lot of great visual reference material available throughout the Middle Ages, and the 12th century is no exception. So it's very easy to find a lot of contemporary reference for the 12th century, whether it's costumes or buildings or anything. So we just we tried not to invent, because as soon as you invent, then you fall into fantasy. Try not to invent, and we try to do everything from research, and that's where things like lime over a public grave with bodies covered in lime and stuff.
That made my historian heart very happy. I wrote that on my notes, and I was like, I love it, because it's those little details that oftentimes, in Facebook groups and stuff like that talk about historical shows, the historians are like, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't do that. But it's nice to see those little details. And in talking about creating things, I want to talk about some of the characters, because I am obsessed with Priscilla. I love that she is loyal to Marian, and she's not something we've seen in previous adaptations. I would love to kind of get your thoughts on creating her as a character and creating that balance between these two very different home lives for both of these women.
Well, she is a favorite of a lot of people, because I think she's she's, first of all, she's very smart, she's whip smart, and it's very clear, but it's organic. She's not trying to prove that she's smart. She's not walking around, look how smart I am. She just is, but she's fun. She's a really fun character. And I think it's really interesting that she's the daughter of the sheriff of Nottingham, and he's a loving father, and their relationship is a very bonded relationship. He in some ways treats her almost like a son. He's sort of bringing her up to be a leader and to sort of to be these to sort of understand the sort of complexities of the world that they live in, and she has a great arc, and where she's going, where we already know she's going, it gets even better and more fun, and it's quite exciting.
She's a sort of medieval debutante.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a femme fatale too. She's got
And
beautifully played by Lydia Peckham.
And there was one element towards the end. Obviously, I will hold off spoilers for later on in the season. But Marian is playing this kind of very dangerous game with Prince John at court, with this kind of court intrigue element. Is that something that we will see resolve in this season, or is that something that you have kind of long range plans to continue playing that out, maybe in future seasons?
It's partly resolved, but all that comes too from crafting a Marian that we've never quite seen, and a Marian with, she's of course deeply bonded to Rob, that she has her own story, that isn't dependent upon Rob's story, and just like he has his own story, but she's a fascinating character. I mean, she's, I think long term, her story is almost the story of becoming a stateswoman. Do you know what I mean? Like really understanding what Norman power is like, and what political power is like, and how is it wielded. Rob can wield a bow and a sword, but what are those other forms of power available, in particular to women in that time period? And examining that and having Marian sort of move through that was really compelling to us.
And getting that opportunity to be away from her father and having kind of her own story open up, away from all of the men influencing her. Speaking of kind of the longevity of the show, it's been really cool to see the way MGM Plus has been marketing Robin Hood as like a replacement for Billy the Kid now that show is ending, and it had 3 seasons. How long do you see Robin Hood going on for? How many seasons do you both kind of have planned in your mind? What's mapped out already?
Oh, multiple in our mind.
Yeah,
multiple. More than 3,
5, 6,
10.
Easily more. I mean, we definitely see the characters, expanding and growing, growing older. We growing up, and the historical connection to the world, the real historical world, is also great because it allows us to kind of go into other characters in history, Henry II and Richard the Lionheart, all of these kind of figures that you've seen touched on in other Robin Hood stories. So, we have the opportunity to kind of expand the real world, the historical world, and Robin and Marian's role within that world as they grow up.
Which was an important part of our, conception or our version of it, is that we're not going to get trapped in kind of the parochial world of Nottingham and Sherwood and Nottingham, and just kind of going back and forth. And that starts to feel like ping pong dramatically and narratively. So
we have somewhere to go.
We have places to go that are just, beyond character, actual just interesting, cities that we've never seen Rob operate in. So that's part of the plan too.
Well, fingers crossed. I want so many more seasons of the show. I had such a blast with it. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.